There we go. We should be live. I'll just do a quick check on Facebook and Twitter to make sure that's recording properly. Wonderful. Okay. I can see 2 people are watching already. It's fantastic. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the event today. I'm here with the wonderful Reverend Maggie Thorne for a Ask Me Anything event about being a priest in 2021. And how today is going to work is I'm going to introduce Maggie, and I'll probably kick today off by asking a few questions that I'm curious about myself. And then please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, and I'll ask Maggie them and Maggie can reply. So Reverend Maggie is one of our vocation advisors for the diocese. She's also a fantastic vicar in the benefice of Coity, Knowlton and Brackler with Coy Church. And she is also now ministry area leader of Penybont Oregal ministry area. I feel like I messed up on that last word, Maggie, but I'm sure you can correct me on that.
Very close, Tara. Well done.
Thank you very much. So, Maggie, when did you come to church life? How has this journey into being a priest been for you?
Where did I come to church life? Well, that started from age 0. I was born into a church family. My dad was a Presbyterian minister, which was subsequently the United Reformed Church. So I was a child of the manse. So I was apparently born between services on a Sunday, and was brought up to go to church. And church has just been part of my DNA right from the very beginning. I think, like most people would find, that when I was a teenager, I needed to find my own faith, not accept my parents' faith, which I did. I did the not confirmation class in the United Reformed Church, but I did church membership classes when I was 15 or so, which is kind of the equivalent to confirmation. And I was very sincere about that. But that was all head knowledge stuff. And it wasn't until I was about 18 that my faith really came to life.
Wow, that's really interesting. And so have you always wanted to be a priest? Because I think a little birdie told me you used to be a music teacher. Have I got that right?
Yes, you have. Well done. No, I haven't always wanted to be a priest. I've been a priest for coming up to 12 years. I was ordained in 2008. And the process towards that was quite lengthy, really. I think looking back, I can see pointers. So really early on, I could see pointers in this direction, but I either didn't have the vocabulary for it or the opportunity for it either. Obviously, back in the 60s, ordination for women was not a thing that could ever happen. So it just wasn't on my radar at all. So I was ordained at 50, but I think probably I would have been in my late 30s when I started to feel that there was something that I was being called to. At the time, I was in the Roman Catholic Church. I married a Roman Catholic and became a Catholic. And that presented 1 or 2 problems, because obviously if you happen to be a woman in the Roman Church, you can't be ordained. So not only was I a woman, I was a married woman and I had a couple of children. So all things considered, it was not a very good recipe. I was blessed by having 2 very good priests, the parish priest and the assistant priest, who were just fabulous with me. So I was quite friendly with them, and they gave me counsel. The first one suggested that I got a spiritual director, I didn't know what one of those was, but I soon found out, and that was very helpful. So I had someone walking with me while I discerned what this call was. And the assistant priest said, well, what the church really needs is bereavement visitors, which got me involved in the local hospice. And over a period, that got me into taking further study. It got me into becoming a psychotherapist, all sorts of interesting twists and turns to the journey. But eventually it came to the point where I thought, this itch has just got to be scratched properly. And I can't actually discern any further than I've already done until I actually leave the Catholic Church and put myself into a position where I can properly explore this. So I have to say it was like cutting off my arms and my legs to part with my church family, my faith family. But I was very quickly scooped up by my local vicar, who has subsequently become quite a friend now that he's retired. He spoke to me at length, and after our first meeting, he said, well, I think this call is genuine. Go forth and see the diocesan director for ordinands. So I leapfrogged over the vocations advisors, found myself very quickly with the DDO, who said, how come you've leapfrogged over? I don't know, just doing as I'm told. And she quickly said, yeah, I think this is a genuine call, but hang on a minute. We've got to get you bedded into the Anglican Church. So it just all sort of went very slowly for years, and then very fast, and then slowed right down again. So that was it, really. So it was quite a long process. It was a necessary process, and it all happened at the right time for me in the end. I mean, if there are any potential ordinands watching today, and it might seem to them that it's an endless process, it slows down, it speeds up, and whatever the timing, it'll be right for you.
Absolutely. And what really struck me about what you're talking about there, Maggie, is the amount of advice and involvement from other people you received along your journey. Yeah. How important is it to have mentors along this journey? I'm assuming that's an enormous help and something that's really necessary.
It's absolutely necessary. And one of the things I always ask potential candidates is, well, who has also said to you that you feel that you might be the right shape of being a priest? And come the ordination, the church has to actually say as a body, yes, we want these candidates to be ordained. So there has to be evidence, not just how you're feeling. There has to be evidence from other people that they've spotted something about you which says, yep, this person should be a priest. And I certainly had that. When I left the Catholic Church and found myself in the local Anglican Church, one very nice lady, I think she spoke to me for a couple of weeks, and on the third week, it might even have been the second week, she said, may I ask whether you've been sent here because you feel like you should be ordained? Which came as a bolt out of the blue, but she could see something pretty quickly. And, I think that's, for those potential ordinands, you've got to have the evidence. Otherwise, doing it on your own you can't do it in your own strength. You've got to have the support of other people. Absolutely, yeah. And I know that's something our current DDO stresses quite a lot. I can just see in the chat we've had a few comments from Matt, our Director of Comms. Matt is actually off today, so I hope he's having a lovely restful time. Hello to you, Matt. And yes, don't tell our DDO that you leapfrogged. Yes. It's just what happened. Sorry, Matt. Sorry, David, as well. Yes, our vocation advisors are absolutely fantastic, Maggie of which being one. And Maggie, you spoke a lot about your call towards vocation being affected by yourself being a woman and being a mother. When you came to the Anglican Church and you started to go through that process of becoming ordained, did you find any particular challenges as a mother and as a woman coming into those roles, and how might they have changed to today? it was liberating that there were no hurdles for being a woman as such. It involved quite a lot of management with the family, but I was already working full time anyway. So my husband and I kind of coxed and boxed a lot with our careers so that we could both parent the children properly. I think the only time I had any kind of adverse reaction to my being a woman, and it wasn't adverse, it was just odd. So when I was a curate, our sacristan said, well, I hope you don't mind, but when you're priested, I'm not going to be able to receive communion from you. So I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, it's because you're a woman. So I said, well, you receive communion from me now that I'm a deacon. So what difference does it make? And he said, well, the thing is, you won't be the boss. So I just, there is all this convoluted, peculiar kind of explanation that because I wasn't the incumbent, he couldn't receive communion from me. But he said, I'm very sorry. I think you do a marvelous job. You're great, but I can't receive communion from you. I thought, well, okay. Wonky theology, I call that.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that was one of the few instances where you faced any challenges. But I think a big challenge on a lot of people's minds right now is obviously the past year that we've had. And what's on a lot of people's minds is our communities coming out of these restrictions. And me personally, I've seen a lot of people involved in vocation that have seen people in their communities stepping up over the past year and taking on more leadership roles. So I'm curious to ask you, has your view of your own vocation changed at all over the past year? And how have you seen it changed in other people?
I think, you hear on the news from time to time, don't you, that because of the situation over the last year, that head teachers, nurses, doctors are all questioning their vocations and either changing from some aspect of medicine to another where they're not going to be dealing with COVID patients or whatever it is. They're questioning where they are currently. And I did wonder whether priests would start questioning their vocations, actually. But I reflected a bit more on where that was coming from for myself. And I thought, actually, no, it shouldn't make any difference to priests, because first and foremost, I would say that we're called to serve. And, if we all find ourselves having to serve in this very weird situation, then so be it. It has been very challenging for us all, I think. And certainly having to learn new technology has been deeply challenging for quite a lot of us. I think personally, I don't like being in front of a computer all day long. So I've really missed being physically with people. Obviously, there have been a lot of deaths over the year, not just from COVID, but we always have a lot of funerals anyway. But not being able to actually put an arm around someone, give someone a hug, even just sort of rub their shoulder in support. That's been really awful, not to be able to be in the same room to support someone. So pastorally, I've found that quite difficult. I think probably I'm a pastor more than anything else as a priest, but others would tell you differently, I'm sure. I think working on Zoom and working on the computers all the time is very intense as well. So it's been very tiring and emotionally tiring, having to abide by certain rules, then change them, and having to go back and unpick everything you've done online and sort it all out again for a new set of rules. That's been wearying.
Definitely. It's been a very, very challenging year. And what's been so interesting about watching priests evolve over the past year is that their vocation hasn't changed, but the way they express their vocation has definitely changed with all the new skills that they've had to learn and all the challenges they've had to overcome. And I can see we've just had a comment from May. She said, really interesting to hear Maggie's experiences, finding the conversation helpful. Thank you. Oh, thank you, May. That's really lovely.
Okay.
And a question I'd like to ask you, Maggie, is we spoke a bit earlier about people saying to you that your call is genuine. If somebody comes to you and talks to you about thinking they may have this same calling, how do you figure out whether this is something that that person should take forward? What are the kind of, not criteria, because that's not really the right word, but what do you look for in someone? How do you know that when they say this is their calling, you need to support them 100% in achieving that?
Well, the first thing I'm looking for is to hear them articulate what's going on inside them. So what is their experience? Trying to tease out what they're feeling, what they're thinking. So that by the end of my first meeting, I can generally say to them, God is calling you to something. And that is fantastic. We don't know what it is yet, but God has called you. And at the very least, God is calling you to a deeper level of discipleship for some reason or another. So I affirm people straight away. But then comes the real task of saying, well, okay, now, where's the evidence? You're feeling this. Where's the evidence? What's your involvement with your church? Has your vicar noticed? Have your friends noticed? Have your family noticed? What kind of support are you getting for being with me today and exploring your vocation? So it's personal evidence and the evidence of what other people are saying.
That's really good to know. Thank you, Maggie. Another thing I'd personally be really curious to know, I think as a young person, it's sometimes very, very difficult to figure out what your vocation is. And this is such a huge topic and sort of outside the realm of direct ministry vocation. But if somebody came to you and said, look, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't know where I find meaning and what my calling actually is. Where would you recommend they start to figure that out?
Are you presuming that they're coming from a church background and regular attendees? Maybe not, but that would be the first place. Are you bedded into a church community? Because that's where you're going to grow. You need other Christians to help you to grow. And if there is that kind of feeling that, yeah, I want to do something for the church, you need to get yourself known by your vicar, by the people in the church, and see where there's an opportunity. So it might be very simple things, like obviously when the churches are all fully open, to be a door steward, a welcomer, someone who leads the intercession, someone who reads the readings at the Holy Eucharist. It could be all sorts of things. And then maybe later on getting onto the PCCs. Certainly when I was a lay person, I was exceedingly active. So I was, what was I doing? I mean, I'd been in choirs, I'd been an intercessor, I'd been sacramental assistant, I'd been on a liturgical committee, planning groups, PCCs. So there's all sorts of things that someone can get involved with just to see what the life of the church is all about and see how they can actually use their skills in it.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. As a communicator, I'd stress to anyone watching, the roles in church life are so diverse, you wouldn't believe. I've just had a comment. Gaynor says, thank you for sharing with us, Maggie. Very encouraging. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. And when I introduced you, I mentioned that you're now a ministry area leader. How do you envision vocations changing, if at all, now we have this ministry area structure within the diocese? Because there's a bigger network of support now, isn't there?
Yes. How do I think it's changing? I think probably the role of the priest is changing. Again, for potential ordinands out there who might not be aware of the change in role, I think I can't remember the name of the author, but there is a wonderful book called "If You See George Herbert in the Road, Shoot Him or Kill Him" or something, which kind of dispels the myth that George Herbert, being the country parson who cycled about the village and just saying good morning to everybody and having afternoon tea with people, that's not the role of the priest. So that particular book dispels the myth. But I think that the role now is very, very different, and rather being the parish priest who everybody knows and loves and knows is looking after them, the role is collaborative and encouraging collaboration. So collaboration between other priests so that the skills are shared, but also really encouraging the laity so they can step up to the plate and do what they can do in their own peculiar way, particular way in their parish. So we're all working together. So, there isn't any kind of more importance attached to being a clergy person than there is a lay person. We're all important in the sight of God. We just have different roles, but we all work together.
Absolutely. So we've got our question from Rodri Dowland Owen. Hi, Rodri. He asks, I have a tendency to speak honestly about my faith, but it comes across as theology rather than spirituality. How would you recommend thinking spiritually?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know if I can recommend how to think spiritually. I think you've got to have a theology, maybe practicing speaking your theology to other people, just in house groups maybe. That's where you can start really giving of your experience. Here we have the Pilgrim course, and I've used that in a couple of parishes before. We only have a small number of us who want to do it, but during that Pilgrim course, it's a bit of gentle Bible study, but with the opportunity to ask one another deep theological questions and then evidence it with our own experience. So look out for house groups where you can do that. I see people spiritually grow in front of me because of that course and because of other house groups that I've been involved with in the past. Speak your theology and speak your experience and learn from one another.
Wow, that sounds like really impactful stuff. And my next question for you, Maggie, but I suspect I probably know the answer, and this is a big question. What's the most fulfilling part of your job?
The most fulfilling. I absolutely love celebrating the Eucharist. So to have been deprived of doing that for so many months over the last year has been, just awful. I know it's been awful for parishioners as well, not to receive communion, but not to be able to celebrate it has been awful. But I think probably what I was saying before, watching people grow in their faith is fantastically rewarding. Working with children in schools, which obviously we can't do at the moment, but in the past where we've been working with children, seeing their little faces come to life when telling them the biblical stories, seeing their excitement is just wonderful and so encouraging. So especially with all the awfulness of the last year, to have that memory of people just being so enthralled by the gospel, I think is what's kept me going, really.
Yeah, wow. And related to that question, and sort of just pivoting back to digital ministry a little bit more, what are the best ways you've seen celebration being done online? Because I think it's really it's really easy to be pessimistic about having to do everything online. But I think a lot of people who perhaps haven't been able to get to church before, or perhaps see their congregation growing a lot as a result of being online, have found it really, really beneficial. So have you seen anything with the people that you're involved in that has made you think, wow, that's been done so well, and that's celebration, that's joyous?
That's hard to say because I'm so busy doing it myself rather than watching it. I think you'd need to ask parishioners rather than the priest, to be honest. I'm just trying to think if I have seen anything. Once or twice I've seen cathedral worship, not necessarily from Llandaff, but from other cathedrals. And cathedral worship is always exceedingly well done anyway. We have done ourselves in Bridgend, we have done Zoom Eucharists. Parishioners tell me they like them, but our regular worship on Zoom is non-Eucharistic. And again, people seem to like that as well. I quite like watching songs of praise. I find that very encouraging, hearing other stories of faith. And it's lovely to hear singing as well, isn't it? Oh, we can't sing. It's lovely to hear singing.
Yeah, singing is definitely one of the big ones I miss. Well, Maggie, I just have to give you a huge thank you for doing this with us today. Unless anybody has any final questions, I think we'll end the stream there, but this will be recorded, so we'll upload it to our social media accounts later. And I just want to give a final thank you to you, Maggie. You've been absolutely fantastic. Do you have any closing words you want to say before we end things here today?
Well, if there are any potential ordinands out there, if from the diocese, then there are several vocations advisors that you can get in touch with. So by all means, get in touch with me, and there are names on the diocesan website for you. So all the best, and God bless you on your forward journeys, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, just to echo what Maggie said, if you follow the URL that you can see on screen at the moment, you'll go to our website, and from there you can find out some information about ministry and vocation more. Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon now. Bye.